Orbital.
RCP chamber pressure looks good. Toggling up. Roger roll, Atlantic.
Water towers can fly!
Yes! Echo Delta nominal.
Flight down lead off. Bring in, lead off. Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.
Morning, good evening, whatever time it is for you around the world. Welcome to another NASA Spaceflight live stream. You can see in front of your eyes, Booster 4 is currently being lifted onto the orbital launch mount. Crews are attached, have taglines attached to the booster. They are holding it steady as they get it lifted. But it's not just going to be me talking today. It's also Chris Gebhardt. What's up, Chris?
Hello, Jack. It's a pleasure to be back on the air with you less than 24 hours later.
Sure enough. And also joining us today is Thomas Berghardt once again.
How's it going, Jack and Chris? It has been us three on like the last couple streams, hasn't it? It's just funny how that worked out, but good to be back on the air, and this time looking at Boca Chica.
Sure enough. And look at that. The booster is getting lifted right now before our eyes.
And look at that, like, aft skirt material that's present. I know the last few times this booster has gone up and down, it's been a lot of questions about, but the engines, they're so exposed, and, well, they still are, but little less.
Yeah, sure enough. And, of course, in the background, we've also got Michael Baylor running the stream as usual, pushing the buttons, pulling the levers. And in the field, we've got Mary and Nick.
Yeah, they just started lifting this, and we went ahead, and we were sitting around actually waiting to go live, and then the booster started moving, so we started up the stream, and now we've got the booster fully out of the transport stand, and you can see the teams working around it, and teams on the taglines, and it'll be moving over to the orbital launch mount.
Indeed,
Yes.
and a fairly big milestone too, right? Because they've been doing a lot of work on the orbital launch mount, getting it ready for fuel loading, commodity work, electrical data connections, everything of that kind. So it will be very interesting to see what the test campaign now becomes once they get it back onto the launch mount.
Yeah, sure enough. Compared to the last time the booster was lifted onto the mount was practically bare last time. Now it has got the whole quick disconnect system. It's got oodles more plumbing and ground support equipment.
And RGB.
Yeah, and thank you. And it's got that's sweet RGB lighting. It makes the mount stronger.
Oh.
Everyone knows that when you add RGB, the launch mount gets finished faster. Everyone knows this.
Yep, makes it go faster, just like stickers on a car, or a spoiler. But sure enough, it's going to be a good old day of watching this thing get lifted onto the mount. Don't forget that we normally do an interactive kind of thing where you can ask questions in chat, and we will answer them just at NASASpaceflight before your question, and it'll pop up in some software that Michael wrote. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what sort of testing they do with Booster 4. I think it's safe to say we can anticipate a serious round of proof testing of some sort. I imagine, right? Would that not make sense for them to do some proof testing before they go straight into any sort of engine firing type activity? What do you guys think?
Yeah, the first thing I would sort of suspect based on the test sequence that we have seen before and what they go through is I would expect some type of non-volatile commodity proof, like maybe an ambient proof, make sure your connections are good first, then move into a, non-propellant cryo proof. And then, move into the propellant test like they've done. That certainly would follow the same sequence of past testing campaigns. So unless there's a major reason to change it because of the orbital launch mount and maybe some different elements to that we're not yet aware of because we haven't seen it go through an entire test, there could be some additional things. But I would expect that we'd have that and then get into some fueling tests and then we've obviously got to have some static fires here, and that's definitely going to be something to behold, because we sort of saw them do a ramp up in that testing with the ship portion of this design. So it will be interesting to see if they continue to do that as well. If they do a subset firing of the Raptors on the booster first before building up to a full 29 engine static fire here.
Yeah, it occurs to me that I mean, I've asked the same question. I know a lot of people ask, what is booster the B2.1 test tank for? What is this test tank, or what is that test tank for? And I'm wondering, normally when we see them do initial proof testing with a pressure vessel like this, like with the ships, they had the hydraulic rams to press on the underside and simulate the forces of launch and the forces of thrust up from the Raptor engines and whatnot. But that might be a little bit of a pain to do with what we're looking at right now, particularly because of what we're looking at right now, a whole bunch of Raptors on the end of this thing. So how do you test the design that you have a whole bunch of Raptors installed on? You make a facsimile, tiny little B2.1 test tank, throw it on a structural test stand that you've tailor built exactly for that purpose, and put it through its paces to validate this design that we're looking at without necessarily needing to do all of the types of proof testing that we've seen. I still expect, like you said, for there to be initial testing, fueling tests, stuff like that before they get into static fires, but doesn't look like we're going to see the old thrust rams applied to Booster 4.
No, really doesn't. And we saw yesterday on NSF Live when the three of us were talking, right? There was the venting and everything that was coming from the orbital launch site. So yeah, it will also be fascinating to see how much work still remains at the orbital launch site, because just because they're ready to put the booster back on it doesn't necessarily mean it's fully complete yet.
Sure enough.
So yeah.
Yeah, it definitely still seems like a lot of work to do just on the mount alone, and that's not counting the orbital tank farm. Really quick, before too much time passes, I want to shout out to whichever worker that was on the transport mount right there. Like, he had his phone out. It was like taking a cell phone picture real quick before getting back on the lift. That is absolutely awesome. Here, we got some super chats rolling in. Thank you, everybody. As usual, thank you for the support. We've got Sebastian St. Amour with a nice $10 there saying, here's to the Chris G to Koru fund. I'm never going to pronounce that word right.
Yes. Thank you. That will be much appreciated.
JV, thanks for becoming a new Red Team member. We hope you enjoy your perks. You get the preview videos before the daily videos go live, and you get the chat emoji. Plus, Chris B's working on some other member stuff, but that's TBD. Gary, thank you for the generous support there. And Rough Riders, as usual. What's up, Rough Riders? Thank you for the support. And Ghost Rider Ryan says, Booster 4 onto the orbital launch mount, Part 3, Electric Boogaloo Part 2. That's amazing.
I like it.
Cool. I can go through and look for some questions. Look at this shot. I mean, I always say look at this or look at that, but I mean, really, take this in for a second. It's the first time we've seen the SpaceX crane lift a booster. It's just, I mean, what a shot. We got the SpaceX logo. This is just beautiful. Sorry, I will shut my flapping gums.
No. This really is. I mean, and the angle itself is wonderful because it's on the engine section, but so deceptive for how big this thing is and how much of the vehicle is above it. But man, you also just look at that cluster of 29 engines, and my brain instantly goes, how is there room for more? There is. But yeah, man, I mean, it really takes you back to sometimes to the to some of the old Soviet rockets too, that had all of those engines down at the bottom of them, and what they must have looked like up close.
Yeah, that's true.
Absolutely delightful to see this
and
thing
now
get
it's
lifted.
shot with Ship 20 just chilling in the background too.
Yeah.
And there's the orbital launch mount that they got to lift it up to, so we're actually going to get a bit of a better view at that engine section as they lift it vertically, as opposed to just moving it horizontally. And that will also give you just a brief glimpse into how they might be able to cram in just about 4 more engines.
I do wonder if when they switch to the 33 engine design. If that center cluster will have to hang down lower, or it'll sort of hang down the same amount, and it's more about cleaning up the space that each Raptor takes and like rotating them slightly, like very delicate, strong, and powerful puzzle pieces. Oh, there you can see the booster's translating over now fairly rapidly. This crane operator's like, I got this. Aaron Kemp says, finally a member. Love the stream. Keep it up. Thanks, buddy. And HWM says, what is the crane called? It's an LR 11,000 crane.
Yeah.
And Phantom Killer, thank you for being a new member, new PadRat member.
How many of us, when we began the year 2021, thought we would become crane experts?
Well, I will say,
or at least know how to talk about them.
Yeah, I still don't feel like a crane expert. I'm so much more happy when we get questions about the rockets themselves still.
Oh, well, yes, me too.
And to be fair, I am by no means an expert in cranes. I just happen to know I'm an expert in cranes at the SpaceX build site to the extent that I know their names. That's about it. But I mean, I did not. If at the beginning of the year or the middle of last year you had said, "Hey, name a model of crane," I would have been like,
I don't know.
Stacky? I don't know. I got that.
Yeah, that or cherry picker, and that's about as far as I could go.
Pretty great. We have a question I don't think we'll be able to tell the answer to, but Matthias is asking, why are RB31 and 32 reddish?
Oh, the engines, there does appear to be a color difference on some of the engines, and I'm wondering if that is just a function of the fact that they have been sitting out in a saltwater environment or they're sun bleached.
Yeah, we've seen that
could
green
be artifacts
coating.
of like previous test firings too.
Yeah. But it would be interesting that why are we only seeing it on 2 of them versus the entire cluster?
And I think when we were closer, like I think you can actually see that like they change color as you go around the circumference of them, which is what led me to believe it might have been a sun exposure or sea exposure thing. But it's a very good question. I see exactly what you're looking at.
Elon's like, we're going to put RGB on the launch mount. We're going to use dichromatic paint on the engine bells so it changes color, but based on the way you look at them, the whole thing is just going to be flashy.
Oh, it's like a mood ring for the booster.
There you go. So what mood is the booster, Chris?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't had a talk with it psychologically yet. But Thomas, what were you saying? It could be an artifact of past test firings. I mean, is it also possible that it's just something we've never noticed because of how it's been oriented before?
Right, and so I'm kind of just throwing out other possible explanations here,
Right.
but we've seen definitely that the coloration of engine nozzles, not just on Raptor, on other engines too, Merlin's included, changes if the engine has been fired a certain number of times, and obviously all of these engines would have been test fired at McGregor prior to coming to Boca Chica, so could just be a fact of this engine's been fired a couple more times, and thus the bell color has changed. But again, we've seen small amounts of changing in coloration, and of course they are still iterating the engines themselves, so could be differences in the coatings on the engine nozzle or things like that.
That's exactly what I was
true.
Something that just has not been seen before. Yeah,
like a different coating on the nozzle would make sense, given that they weren't the bells were not always green. They were kind of a metal or metallic plain color, and then at a certain point they kind of switched over to being green. So maybe those. I mean, we've seen engines removed and then installed on Booster 4 since the last time it has seen any activity. Look at that. We got some boat action. The shrimp boat coming back in. Wow, this shot really puts it into perspective how large the launch site is and how large the booster and ship are. So yeah, my point with all that being, the red engines could be newer ones that had been recently installed with some sort of new experimental coating on it.
They also could have been coated like here in Boca Chica. Like they could be working on the engines while they sit around and things like. So.
Very good point.
The engines could be different between the last time we saw them when Booster 4 rolled out the last time. Like they could have done work there too.
Very good question from a time. It's a good question when you get a lot of mileage out of it like that. Like that was a good question. Let's see. Jason Boo is asking, can we look at the top of Booster 4? I mean, do you have a plane? If you have a plane,
Yeah.
then yes.
Or
If you-
access to a spy satellite, please let us know.
Sure.
Yeah, paging NASA spaceflight member Harry Stranger. Let's get some satellite imagery of today, please. I'm sure you've already thought of it. Let's see, a couple more super chats.
But I think, sorry, I just want to step back to that just a question, just a moment. There is a permanent no-fly zone around the most immediate area now, right? Or am I misremembering that?
To a certain altitude. I mean, it's not unrestricted. It's not that you can't fly, period. But
And
I would have to.
So
it
is
is a
still
no drone zone, but
Oh,
no
drone zone.
Thank you.
Yes,
Sorry, that's more what I meant. Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah, it's been that way for a couple years now. And
Yeah.
the
Not
booster
surprising.
went down a little bit, and then now it is raising back up again, and also translating closer over to the mountain again. And look, it's so cool to see all the workers down there at the bottom grabbing the taglines and sort of muscling this thing into place.
I do love the physicality of like moving something so complex that's designed to be so automated in the goal, and when you watch it in the birthing stages of everything, like it's still so manual. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a surprising amount of percussive maintenance and just hitting it till it works and grunting, and yeah, it is still very hard work, even though it's rocket science.
Although I have to say, every time like I glance back at the visual that we have right now and the actual shot, my brain misfires into thinking that the silver object next to the ship is like a small scale version of the booster.
Right.
Like whatever that is so shiny. It's just like, oh, don't move it. No. But no, we're following the booster. We're following the booster as we should be. I'm glad I got that in right before the camera moved, though.
Yeah, good timing there.
Yeah.
It looked like another one of those folded lifts, the big wind turbine crew lifts there. Such an amazing shot.
Yep. This is from Mary, of course, who was out there in the field and appreciative of her contributions as always.
This is a little bit of a unique operation. I feel like when they had the LR 11350, the Franken crane, this is just a much different lift. I'm not sure quite how to articulate that, not being a crane expert, but this feels different.
The swing around is much more pronounced to me on this one, and I don't know if that's just a function of the angle of where Mary is today, or like different positionings of the cranes and stuff like that. But I'm with you, Jack. Like there's a visual difference feel to this today.
Yeah, something about it. A couple more super chats. Erland, thank you for the Norwegian kroner. They say, isn't this the first time the crane are being used? Lovely streams y'all having. Well, thank you for enjoying the streams. No, the crane has been used to lift some things, right? But I think it's the first time it's lifted a booster, right?
Definitely the first time it's lifted a booster, and yeah, my memory is the same as yours. Like it's been used to lift miscellaneous things around the area, but my memory matches yours. That's not to say our memories are correct, but my memory matches yours.
There's sort of a wider shot of the orbital launch complex with the booster swinging around to the side of the tower that has the launch mount. You can see the chopstick arms off to the left, which will be used for future stacking operations. Looking forward to that, of course. And ship 20 off to the very left side, left of the orbital tank farm, and the B. Is that B 2.1 or is that a different test tank? I lost track of these things.
That is the GSE-4 test tank. It's a test tank made out of the parts of the 4th GSE tank.
Thank you, Jack.
Yep. And basically they're moving the entire crane around instead of just sort of moving the boom around and moving the crane slightly like this. You can even you can even see the treads, if that is the correct term. I assume it is, like the tank treads.
I was going to say it's moving, right?
Yeah, the crane itself is moving. It's tracking forward, which is super neat.
So one might say that this is the crawler of Boca Chica.
Okay.
Yeah.
Every
Shuttle.
spaceport needs a crawler.
Yes.
And check off the shuttle reference for the
I
stream. All right, we're good to go.
I didn't say it yet, and I have had 2 opportunities to say it, so
All right, but
I'm doing
crawlers
well.
counts as a shuttle reference. I mean, I guess
Apollo,
that's true. And
SLS.
SLS and Ares 1.
And Omega, Rip Omega. RIP in pieces.
Oh, rest in peace.
Mike J, thanks for becoming a Capcom member. That's awesome of you. You get Discord access. So when that propagates, pop into Discord, and I'll greet you with my customary Forrest Gump waving gif.
Are there any other rockets that use the crawlers? Saturn V shuttle, Ares 1X, SLS, will obviously.
I mean the Saturn one. I mean both of the Saturn variants. The 1B and the 5 used it.
Okay, yeah.
Whatever the Saturn V variant was. I mean they didn't really call it a variant. The one that launched Skylab used it too.
But Saturn V.
But Saturn V basically. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the day that they use a crawler to roll out a full Starship stack vertically to 39A.
It'll never happen.
No, I wanted to though. Would be so cool.
I'm just going through.
I mean, I would honestly imagine if they did opt to take 1 or 2 of the high bays in the VAB for Starship operations, which spoiler alert, this is when we need the rampant speculation thing to show up on the screen. Because there is nothing that would indicate that this is in work, so please don't take that as that. But like if they ever were to say, yeah, we want High Bay 1 and High Bay 2, which are the 2 that are available for Starship, build, refurb, blah, 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 I would kind of imagine they would just use self-propelled modular transporters, expand the road network there, and go down the road to 39A, because that way you can actually get it around 39A to the point in the fence perimeter where you would actually need to bring the booster through the fence, which is sort of on the east-southeast side of the pad. And also they built the horizontal integration facility right over the crawlerway once it starts to make the turn to 39A, so they'd have to get off the crawlerway. So I just think they'd change the road network personally. That just seems easier than...
It's not as cool as using the crawler, Chris.
It is, but something tells me that SpaceX would be standing there going, 8 hours to reach the pad?
That's fair. That's fair. I think, is the booster starting to go up a little bit? Obviously, they got to get it up to the elevation of the mount itself.
I don't think so. I think it's
maybe not.
I think it's still just hanging there.
Just chilling. Looks like a lift may actually be going up behind it from this perspective. Don't know what they might be looking at or something.
I think it's the lift that's actually at the top of the booster, and the perspective is just weird from
Are
here.
Are you talking about that blue one, Thomas?
Yeah.
Yes, it looks like there's a smaller one, the small blue one in the like slightly in front of the giant wind turbine.
Yes. So on the right hand side view, you can kind of see it looking. Actually, it might be looking more at the mount than the booster. But it is confusing.
So the booster has a quick disconnect panel on it where it interfaces with the launch mount, and it could be that they're tracking all the way around, sort of to line up the QD panel with the QD on the mount itself. But it's curious why they wouldn't just rotate the booster. Maybe that's something this crane versus the previous crane is not capable of doing, or maybe there's just a reason they don't want to do it.
Yeah, that's true. And it is going up now in relation to what's in the background. Yeah.
Yes. This is, of course, a crane-assisted takeoff, if you're looking for the technical term.
Check it off. If it's on your bingo card, check it off. Doc Watson, thanks for the support. We do not have a nickname for this crane. It's a SpaceX SpaceX LR 11,000. And I know you said I can't say that, but I just did. Sorry, bud. But thank you for the support. Thomas, thank you for the support from Germany. Marcin, thank you. They say they've been out of touch recently. Have the chopsticks been moved yet, or are they still being built? They're still being built. They have not been lifted up. They have moved a little bit, as sort of as a unit, but they have not lifted anything yet. We have not seen them ascend up the tower or like do any kind of wiggle waggle tests beyond a few small movements. Joseph, thank you for the generous support there. They say, Merry Christmas, NSF. Great shots today, Mary. I would like to retweet that. I retweet that verbally. Is that a thing people say? Oh, God, I've been spending too much time on the internet.
I retweet that verbally. I like that. Oh.
It's awful. You shouldn't like it. But thank you for the support there. Bill Sparks, thank you. Senti, thank you. And it's just Chloe. Thank you. They say they still need they'll need Mechazilla for stacking ship 20, right? A lot of questions about that. If this crane is capable of putting the ship on the booster. I do not think it is as configured, and I do not know if there is a configuration that can do it, or if that's the sort of thing where they're going to have to wait for the chopsticks for that. Do either of you?
I don't know if we've gotten
a
really firm answer on that.
I need to furiously Google search for the PDF for the possible configurations of this crane. Let's see. Good question though, Chloe. If we figure out an answer, we'll let you know. We is asking, why doesn't the booster do a hop or high altitude test flight on its own before orbital launch attempt?
This is a question I could talk about because it's not a crane question. But so as far as a high altitude flight, that would be difficult for a booster on its own because the booster isn't really aerodynamically stable all on its own. It is meant to be under a Starship. So there's no nose cone up top. It doesn't have aerodynamic control surfaces. I mean, grid fins are technically aerodynamic control surfaces actually, so I take that back. But still, it wouldn't have the aerodynamic characteristics that you'd want to fly it all on its own, at least at any high airspeed. You can fly it at low airspeeds and do, for example, a 150 meter hop or a 200 meter hop, something short like that they've done with, if you go back to the very early Starship prototypes, that is feasible, but there's been no indication that they actually plan to do that, and that is further corroborated by the fact that they've removed landing legs from these vehicles and they require ground infrastructure to land properly. So I'm not sure, until that infrastructure is ready, you're not going to see any sort of landing attempt. So a hop test isn't really feasible in that sense either. So yeah, there isn't a whole lot you can do with the booster design to fly it and test it on its own in flight. Obviously, ground testing, it will do plenty of ground testing on its own, static fires, etc. But flight test will be with a Starship on top, and once the booster can deliver a Starship to the velocity and altitude target that it needs to get to for whatever test the Starship will do, anything after that point is experimental test for the booster itself. So coming back down to land, doing mock-up landing burns out over the water, or then actually returning to the launch site and attempting a catch and things like that, will all not affect the primary mission of getting Starship and maybe even a payload up to orbit. Very similar to how the Falcon 9 development program went. So, but as far as Booster 4 or any booster flying on its own, that's probably not going to happen.
Wouldn't they also have to do something like to artificially change the center of mass, because these boosters are also designed to be in so-called free flight, right, with a very, very low amount of propellant within them.
Sure.
But when they're launching off the ground, they've got to have a lot more propellant in them. So you would also have to, and we saw them do that on SN4 and 5, right, where they put the little hats on them to properly balance them and everything.
That
but that
too,
would be a
and
consideration.
Also, just a matter of changing how much you fuel it too. That'll change
Yeah.
your center of mass characteristics.
You can see there's crews on the launch mount itself now,
Yep.
awaiting the arrival of the booster. I swear I saw a person taking a selfie a couple seconds ago. I mean, wouldn't you if you were up there?
Yeah. Just don't post it anywhere. Don't get yourself in trouble. Yeah, actually getting up pretty high, pretty quickly now, and getting up to the altitude of the launch mount. Altitude, I guess elevation is probably a better word. Altitude is more for, higher, higher distances than a few hundred feet.
When it
started
takes
talking
off
about
without the
aerodynamics.
assistance. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jack.
Started talking about aerodynamics and your brain went into airplane mode.
It did.
Altitude for when it's not a crane assisted takeoff, right?
Right, exactly.
Look, there all the workers are kind of gathering. Looks like they're grabbing the taglines.
Yeah, looks like it.
They're starting to, yeah.
And also, I'm assuming like you're not allowed to stand under the booster as it swings over, so you gotta like stand to the side of the mount that the booster's not coming over.
I would significantly hope you're not supposed to stand under it.
I
as
mean,
it
in
comes up.
theory, it should be safe to do that, but I don't. You know.
Right.
And the
Right.
crane is now rotating the booster into position.
Yeah, it is. Look at that.
And again, this is the first all-up super heavy booster that we've really seen. Booster 3 only ever got 3 engines. Refresh my memory, did Booster 3 even get a fit check with more than 3 engines ever?
Oh man, I'm blanking.
Oh, gosh.
I don't think so.
That was so long ago, Thomas.
I know. At least, especially in Boca Chica time, where
Yeah.
you know, a month feels like a year.
last,
So I'm gonna go out on a limb
last
and
week
say
felt
this.
like a month with everything that
geez.
happened.
So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this is the first booster with a full engine complement, even though it's 29 and not the upgraded 33. Knowing that someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's the case.
Because 4 is the one that had them all thrown in
Yes,
and then taken back out and put back in, right?
I believe so. Oh, jeez, now you're making
yeah,
me
but you
sick.
never know.
Hold on.
Eh.
Booster 3 lift, because I know
Well, no one's yelling that we're wrong yet in chat, so that's a good.
that's a good sign.
It's a good
Chat
sign.
usually knows better than I do, to be completely honest.
The fit check happened with all 29, but
Yeah, but that was.
that was with. Right. All right, and it looks like we are getting over the mount here, getting centered.
Okay, yeah, I have confirmed. I do not believe the Booster 3 ever had more than 3 engines on it. So
Yeah, the fit check was with 4 and 20.
yeah.
Because 420, haha.
All right, and it is over the mount, so now they're gonna wrangle it and lower it.
Booster wrangling. I like that.
Pretty much. I've already got it. They pre-lassoed it, so it's easy. Right?
Yeah. Is that cheating?
No, that's like how you do it. It's like a rodeo, but with rockets. Rocket rodeo.
There you go.
Oh man. Osprey is asking, are they going to cover the excess Raptor plumbing on the booster heat shield with some cover, or is it staying exposed like that? Well, not being an internal SpaceX person, I do not know. But we have seen them lift a booster like this with bare Raptors. We've seen them lift it with this new sort of thermal shield, shroud, whatever you want to call it. These are all prototypes. This stuff will change. I bet you booster, 5 or 6 or whichever the next one, 8 to be lifted onto the mount, will probably end up looking different. They're iterating rapidly here, so it's hard to say if they will do something or won't do something. They might. They're still figuring it out, really.
I say yes to it, just because, if you think about it, a lot of ice is going to build up on the outside of that vehicle during the fueling process that can come off in rather large chunks. I just have a feeling they weren't needed for the lift, so we just haven't seen them yet.
Right.
On the install.
It might even be easier to
their
install
shot that
them
they're
on
already
the launch mount. Like the launch mount might provide access to those areas.
It might be, and also to be completely fair with the size of the operation Boca Chica, they could likely already be there as well, and just haven't been put on.
Also, we're obviously looking at the beautiful shot from Mary. That's the up-close version on the launch mount and the engine section. And then you just have to remind yourself with the context shot on the right of how tall the thing is above the main shot, It's like, oh yeah, they're lifting this thing onto the mount. Oh wait, it's also that tall, It is absolutely a massive rocket.
The senses of, your sense of scale rapidly gets distorted, especially when you have, close-up views of something that is kind of far away. But the shot on the right really, really underscores how tiny those people are compared to the booster.
Mm-hmm. And see, it looks like the booster's getting lowered into the mount now.
Yeah, sure enough, it's going right down into its home.
It's a smooth operation.
that was a lot quicker than the last time they did it too. If they don't like super pause here, that was a lot
Yeah,
quicker.
yeah.
I wonder how much of that is experience on the part of the teams working out there, and how much of that is perhaps weather related or circumstantial type things,
Right.
where maybe it happens to be easier to operate this crane, or maybe uh, the wind is lesser today, or I always wish I could like be a fly on the wall and hear some of the things that they discuss as they're doing lifts like this. Like, oh yeah, no, it'll be a cakewalk today. There's no wind. It's like, well, we'll get it done in 30 minutes. It's very cool to see them progressing, not only in terms of launch site readiness, not only in terms of hardware readiness, but also in terms of crew readiness, like the human element that is required to make all this stuff work. Bill Sparks, thanks for the support. Larson, thank you for becoming a pad rat. Appreciate all you members out there. Crazy Dave 911 says yeehaw about time. Samuel Lambert, thank you for the support. Asking about B4 being for just ground testing now, or if that is false. I've been seeing that going around. It wouldn't shock me if Booster 4 does not end up flying. At this point, we'll just kind of have to wait and see what happens to 4 and 20.
I'll say this. If the plan is still to fly in January, February-ish, yeah, I think it's going to be 4. But we don't know. I mean, we saw 5 take its little trip earlier this week too. It's with 15 and 16 now over in the Starship waiting area. I think that's what we agreed to call it. But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what they do with that, because we were sort of discussing yesterday on NSF Live the the whole element of would they seem to build reserves and backups just in case, right? So like if they were to find something and it was easier or quicker to swap out Booster 5 with Booster 4, they might do that, right? But until we actually see them do a little bit more work on 5, it's going to be a good question as to how the timelines would align if, as you were saying, Jack, like the speculation that we've heard. But yeah.
Part of me says, like, why would you not fly 4? It's got engines, just fly it. Like, how else are you going to dispose of it? Spend a bunch of time and a bunch of dollars having a crews scrap it and like tear it apart? Or
That's the mission goal behind the Booster 4 flight. Well, we need to get rid of it somehow.
Might as well fly it and get the data that we can, and then just ditch it in the ocean. Yeah, exactly.
But like I said, part of me wants to say that or wants to think that, and then the other part of me remembers ship 16, and I become sad. So it's really, I'm not going to proclaim to know one way or the other how that's all going to work out. But it is interesting.
Wasn't 16 like the backup to 15, and like it was going to fly until 15 succeeded or something like that?
Yeah, but the whole backup discussion we kind of had yesterday, I don't think is necessarily like a thing that's codified, or maybe even a thing that anybody at SpaceX potentially even considers or thinks about. It was more just like looking at how they've done things and sort of laying it out on the table and being like, well, technically this one was a backup for that one. They're both built basically the same. Kind of thing. I don't know that it's necessarily like anything official, but at the time, it certainly felt like they were going to keep doing those sort of medium altitude flight tests. And when it turned out that they weren't flying 16, it was kind of like, oh, well, now what? So, but I do want to say, as they get this thing lowered down and sort of pushed and pulled into the exact right place. I imagine this is the hard part, that it's interesting that they iterate so rapidly with their vehicles and their testing out there. And at this point, Booster 4 is probably old in terms of the designs that they're thinking. I mean, we know just the big one, right, is the 29 engine thrust puck. We've seen, I think, 2 or 3 33 engine thrust pucks delivered in the recent months, and not even like yesterday, like relatively long ago in Boca Chica timescales. And so it's Booster 4 needs to do the thing it was designed to do, which is launch Ship 20, or it needs to get out of the way very quickly because it is rapidly becoming obsolete. So those are sort of the two ends of the spectrum, right? Like, use it, you've got it, get the data, or don't even waste your time on it. It's no longer a representative test article.
Yeah, but I mean, like, yeah, exactly what you were saying, and like, to me, there would still be a benefit in flying it, right? Because you're going to get a good data on how clustering the engines together like that actually works in flight, right? Versus your modeling, right? There's even if other parts of the design are obsolete, there's still things like you were saying, Jack, that they could still get useful data out of.
Yep.
Absolutely. Really quick, Janine and Carl Barter, thank you for the support. They say good morning from Oz. Good morning. Third Wheel, thank you for the support. They say, what is take on Musk talking about SpaceX possibly facing bankruptcy? We've talked about this one a lot. I think the short version of it is it's sort of Elon Musk's management style. If you have watched Elon Musk and his companies for long enough, this is sort of, he aims for the stars and really, sometimes maybe uses hyperbole, but ultimately it's in service of maybe not getting all the way to a certain goal, but getting further than they would have otherwise. And screaming and shouting about potential bankruptcy is sort of in that same basket of, if you say, hey, we really got to do this or we might be in trouble later, that's one thing. If you say, hey, we got to do this or we're going to exit, it's an existential threat to the company, that's a whole other thing. So really just think it was more of a motivator, but you did have those comments on Twitter about with a global recession and the perfect circumstances, it is possible, which of course, a meteor could hit the Earth tomorrow and we could all cease to exist. Who knows?
It was very much in a worst case scenario, yeah, it's possible, even if it is still unlikely. But definitely a case of the CEO trying to motivate their employees with a perhaps somewhat unique strategy. Threatening bankruptcy, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but rather than a sign that SpaceX is like actually in financial trouble or anything like that.
Yeah, and you got to think that a lot of SpaceX employees are incentivized in their pay with stock options, and that is certainly an incentive to make them work hard and say, hey, all that stock you've been hoarding and saving up and working so hard for in hopes of it paying off in the future as SpaceX continues to succeed, we might not exist.
Sure.
So that's another thing. Booster looks like it's going almost all the way down now, just a little bit further to go, but it is looking very good.
It is indeed.
Jack, thank you for becoming a new member, coming in at launch director. Thank you so much.
Ooh, nice.
We really appreciate all of our flight engineers and our launch directors. Those are the two higher tiers of our membership program, so thank you so much. Scott Green, thanks for the support. Conservative Space Nerd, thank you for the support. They say B5 is on the island of misfit toys. Only Elon knows. Stephen Heckman with a naming suggestion for the SpaceX LR 11000. Let's see. Scott Green, thank you for the support. Asking about the crane cab so the operator can see better. Maybe that's why the crane moved. I think they just physically needed to move the crane around in order to access.
The crane cab, if you look earlier, like the cab actually tilts up as you lift vertically, so you're looking up at the load. I think that's might have been what they're talking about. I noticed it earlier when they were starting to raise the booster.
Very good point. Yeah, good.
It's like the crane operator is like sitting back, leaning back the whole cab so that they can see better.
It's like the opposite of the Concorde where they pitch the nose down.
Exactly.
The cab up.
Yeah.
I don't know why that's what I'm equating it to, but
that's hilarious that you went there, but that's exactly what it is. The droop snoot.
I like planes. Deal with it.
The Concorde.
We miss it so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not even going to start because then I will get sad. Let's see. Christian, thank you for the support. They say, what does a booster sit on? What physically holds it standing up? I believe on the bottom of the skirt there are mounting points. Sort of, think about what it looks like when you see the booster on the transport stand with all those clamps going around the circumference of the skirt. I imagine there's a similar mechanism. We've gotten some limited views of it. It just looks like a series of clamps, basically, I think is an accurate way to put that. Just trying to get through some more of these super chats before we get too far behind here. Booster looking very down though. You can see the crews
Yeah.
are sort of tugging on that tagline there.
Yeah.
You can still see it kind of swaying side to side as they position it properly, but it is being lowered into the mount relatively quickly. And that you can't even see the Raptors anymore.
Oh yeah, good call on the swing.
And it's worth mentioning too when we were talking about the hold down clamps and everything, that they don't attach to the skirt. The skirt is not structural support like that. So the clamps are higher up on the rim of the booster because they have put the boosters on. They have put this booster onto this stand without the skirt on it. So just want to clarify that it's not the lowest part that it holds on that, which might just be what you would logically think, right? Oh, it holds onto the lowest part of the vehicle. Not in this case. It actually holds on above the skirt.
Oh yeah, by skirt I don't mean the thermal protection sort of engine shroud that we've seen. I just mean that bottom ring there. Let's see. Yeah, because like you said, the last time they lifted 4 up onto this mount, that didn't exist. Scott Green,
It's a kilt, not a skirt.
Huh?
Sorry, I just saw that in chat. That was funny.
Star kilt. You heard it here first. Scott Green, thank you for becoming a pad rat. ADC TV UK says Elon said a while ago that B4 would land in the sea and B5 would be the first catch landing. That's possible. Entirely possible. And it's also entirely possible that plans have changed since then.
Yeah, I was going to say entirely possible. 5 never flies now if 4 does. So, yeah.
Jack Houston said, thank you for the support there. They say no one else is at the gym, is at the staff gym, so I've got you guys on the sound system. Keep up the good work. It's like, oh, I kind of want to give you like an exercising pep talk, but I don't want everybody to hate me, so I'm not going to do it. But
Actually,
you can do it.
I heard that and I was like, oh, right, I need to run still today. Because we've been on booster watch since like 7 a.m. Eastern. Like
we have, which is in fact 5 a.m. Pacific.
Yeah, God, you've been up a long time, Jack. Yeah.
Renee, thank you for becoming a pad rat. Tim W, thank you for the support. They say whatever data they get, it still hurts me to think that all that craftsmanship will end up in the sea. Well, don't worry, Tim. It shouldn't hurt you too bad because it's all in the service of never throwing boosters away again. I guess not unless you have some kind of really insane mission that requires an expendable super heavy, which would be awesome.
That would be nuts.
Why would that even... How would that even be a thing? Just because of refueling on orbit. You know what I mean? Like, I get exactly what you're saying, but like, I think...
If you'll let me frolic through the halls of my mind, how about a giant super space telescope that doesn't launch on a Starship stack, but some sort of expendable fairing thing, all in the service of getting the absolute most upmass possible for some sort of, I don't know, fantasy giant mecha telescope.
So take a Starship, remove the aero surfaces, replace the nose cone with a deployable fairing, and then fly everything expendably? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Do it.
When you need 500 tons on Mars tomorrow.
SpaceX. LB, thank you for the support. They say, why didn't they lift in place with the catch arms? Because they're not ready yet. Catch arms are still being worked on. Leon, thank you for the support. They say, if you think B4 lands in the ocean, then they will recover it and service the Raptors to fly again. I do not think so, because SpaceX is all in on Raptor 2, right, guys?
That too, but also, if those Raptors touch ocean water, they're done. That's not something you're going to get back. You might be able to get, like, assuming it doesn't explode, and it does more of, like, we've seen Falcon 9 when they splash down, that parts of it remain more or less intact, they could harvest maybe the grid fins back. Like, those would probably be fine. But other than that, the tank section's going to be toast, the engines will be toast, any electronics are toast. Not sure you get many more useful components back after an ocean landing.
Something about the use of the word harvest there, Thomas. Really.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that wasn't the right word. Recover is probably a better word, but harvest is the one that came out, so we're rolling with it.
I like it. It is interesting, though, that there was a time where I thought, any rocket hardware touches seawater and it's game over. And now we live in the days of fairings recovered from the ocean and reused on a regular basis, which is wild. But fairing is not rocket nozzle that is super hot and super delicate with turbo pumps and everything. It probably helps that it's basically just a giant space canoe.
It's true. It's true.
A giant space canoe.
Now, what kind of parachutes would you need to recover a deployable Starship-sized fairing?
I wouldn't even. I wouldn't even want to know because you wouldn't even. Gosh, you wouldn't. Man, yeah, I wouldn't even want to know.
It's a bad idea. It's a bad idea.
Paul Sorensen says, "Don't be sad." Well, thank you, Paul. Terry Heaton, thank you for the support. They say, "I think they need to rescue the booster in the Starship for museum and display purposes." That would sure be nice.
I think
more-
it. I mean, we've seen SN15 and SN16 sitting out there for a while. Booster 5 is over in that area. We don't know if it has the same fate, but I think it's fair to say that there will be some leftover hardware from the Starship development program that will stick around. I mean, Starhopper's still sitting out there, and who knows if it stays there the whole rest of its life or if it gets a more permanent display somewhere. There's hardware hanging around.
I feel like it deserves to stay there. It's like its retirement on the beach, just sipping margaritas.
Sipping margaritas and holding the boosters to task.
Exactly. In my day, we didn't fly with guidance systems. We just had RCS and thrust. I don't know. It does make me sad that SN5 and SN6 were scrapped because I feel like those were prime objects to be museum hardware, but so it goes.
Yeah, but I also get the fact that, maybe, like SN15 was the first one to complete the first,
Yep.
This was the milestone that needed to happen to definitively prove that it's possible. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So maybe that, and maybe that's what we're waiting for with a booster, right? I mean, because we also know some of the early boosters that do get caught, right, and do come back and do return are going to be obsolete very, very quickly. So maybe that's also what they're waiting for on the booster side of things too, is save the one that you get back first and use that as the museum piece as well.
Do we think the booster is down now? It looks like that lift you can see on the camera on the right. That lift that had been up near the top of the booster is now sort of
on the way down. Yeah.
On the way down, looks like.
It doesn't appear that it's moved, and it appears to be very rock solid in the cradle. In the mount, sorry. I should use the correct terminology.
I think the booster might still be moving ever so slightly. Not nearly as it was before, but I'm not sure if it's fully down yet.
Okay.
You can still see crews kind of walking around it, maybe giving it a little push and a tug to get it kind of positioned properly on the mounts.
It's really fascinating that this is something we've seen them do now twice, and yet, or wait, 3 times? Oh my god, my brain. Either way, we've seen them do this multiple times now, and yet it clearly requires a little bit of delicacy and and a good amount of precision to get the booster in the exact right spot. And that's with a extremely talented, highly trained crane operator and crews. And I guess
it's moving down more.
Oh, nice.
Yep,
You're right.
there you go.
I have to think that, cranes are a relatively, just a little bit well-established thing, and chopstick arms for a tower are basically not. They're brand new, never been used or tried before. And I guess where I'm going with all of this is it's going to be interesting to see how they get this level of precision out of the chopstick arms. I mean, they're going to have to equal the finest cranes and crane operators humankind has built thus far.
Well, we saw those little tracks on the arms when they were being attached and lifted and everything. So what I think is like their plan is just that those tracks are going to be able to do those really minute movements back and forth, and everything to align it. And because the arms can sort of swing, yeah, I mean it'll be fascinating to watch them dial that in. It really will.
Yet another awesome milestone we can look forward to. It looks like that lift is it folded up? I can't see the basket with the people in it anymore. It might just be behind the chopsticks.
I think so.
You can see on the left though. Oh, never mind.
Oh, there you go. There's that lift.
Yeah.
Yep.
Where'd the booster go? No.
you can see its boom on the leftmost part of the screen right now. In Mary's shot, you can see it retracting, like the telescoping arm. You can see it retracting as well. Neat. I just love the visual of all of the crew members walking around up there, sort of looking down looking. It almost looks like they're just like shoegazing, just like hanging out. Like, yeah, what are you doing? No, I'm just hanging out. But no, they're doing a very serious business of getting this booster aligned. And look, there you can see the lift coming down. Even better.
And after seeing how high that lift was before, think they're happy to be done whatever they were doing.
Yeah, those wind turbine lifts do not mess around.
Hmm.
Mitch Thompson asks, aren't they going to do lifts like this in the future with the chopsticks? Yes, that's what we were just talking about.
Keeping an eye on, or close eye on the pixels to see if it's still moving down and still moving side to side. Don't believe the booster is fully down yet, but you can see it has been lowered a fair bit into the launch mount. Can't even see those Raptor engines sticking out anymore. But this is installing Booster 4 back onto the launch mount. Not the first time it's been there, but mounted back there after some additional work has been completed on both the mount and the booster, and ahead of its next test campaign, which will hopefully start in the coming weeks. We'll be
Not that I
looking
want this
ahead.
to happen, but I'm thinking back to the early stages of the Starship prototyping program, and there was things like the Mark 1 pop, the SN1 pop, and the SN3 crumple pop,
Mm-hmm.
which is to say nothing of the
Crumple pop,
SN4.
I love it.
I mean, as they get into 29 Raptor engine firings, we are sure to see some exciting stuff, I guess is what I will say.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully nothing destructive that sets back the program, but hopefully we get some fireworks. I mean, just seeing 29 Raptors all fire at once is going to be absolutely amazing, and this is paving the way for that today.
Forget about seeing 29 Raptors ignite at the same time. Hearing and feeling 29 Raptors at the same time is going to be insane.
I wonder if there will be any discernible difference in sound between 29 and 33. Like, they're both just going to be so immense that I'm not sure it'll matter.
Yeah, and since the scale isn't, what's the word I'm looking for? Since
It's
it
not a
doesn't
linear
scale
relation
proportion.
between-
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you.
it's-
Yes. Yeah, linear is the word I was looking for. Yes. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's one of those moments where, like, what you experience yourself is going to be so dependent on, like, the atmospheric conditions of the day that, like, you'd need, like, a decibel thing with you, a decibel reader. I don't actually know what the heck that's called. But yeah, you need something with you. But yeah, because that's a good question, Thomas. How different will it be?
I believe, Chris, you ready? Are you ready to hear what it's called?
Go for it.
Can you guess what it's called?
Is it really a decibel reader?
It's a decibel meter.
No, meter. Dang it,
close.
so close. Like, I would blame that on mumbling, but people can just rewind.
I don't know why, but that was remarkably satisfying.
That was awesome. Thank you.
I'm going back and forth on the stream now to see if the booster's still moving.
All the guys on the platform, or all the folks on the platform, definitely seem to be looking down again.
Mm-hmm. Listen, SpaceX, all I'm saying is if you want to let us have a camera inside the launch mount, we won't be opposed.
We'll just call it RIP cam, like RIP cam. It'll have but one life, and then the next one will be RIP cam 2, and then we'll segment them until we get to 15, and then we'll completely change the numbering and naming system.
No, you gotta do 1 and then 3, And then rename 3-1 again.
Yes. Exactly. Now you're getting it.
It's so bad.
I wrote up a start guide for the editors at one point and had a whole thing in there about, just the history so that they knew what they were working on in case
Yeah.
they didn't, if they knew Starship but didn't know all the little nuts and bolts. And yeah, try explaining this to some of your friends who don't follow the program carefully. Be like, well, there was number 1 and then there was number 2, but that was in Florida. Then there was number 3, but then they called number 3 number 1. It's just like, oh God. They'll stop being your friends pretty fast. That's what I'm saying.
And then it was ship, and then it was Starship, and then it was Booster, and
But before that, it was Mars Colonial
And it's still
Transporter.
kind of called Super Heavy, but not really.
And
And
before
at one
that,
point,
it was
it looked like Planet Express ship. Like,
Yeah. It really did.
it really did.
It needed some teal paint and some bigger fins. Like a red light on each of the end of the fins, like an old Cadillac. PB and J Maniac, thank you for the support. May all of your meals that you desire to be filled with PB and J's. Taylor Van Camp, thank you for the support. They say, how will they combat sway when the booster ship is supported by the top? Will people still be there with guide ropes?
I think if you're lifting on 2 chopstick arms versus a single crane with a load spreader, it is much less subject to sway.
Yeah.
Because it's resting on 2 points rather than 1. So I think it should, and maybe even the arms could adjust for that a little bit. So they won't necessarily need guide ropes. Although I could also see them, like, maybe that's an early lift thing that once they start messing with the catch arms and actually using them for stacking, there'll be improvements there and they'll kind of refine the process and what else they need as far as personnel and things like that.
I apologize if you guys just heard some sort of screeching on the stream from my mic. Someone just walked by my apartment, absolutely belting out a song of some sort. That was weird.
We did not hear it, but that's good to know.
I'm really thrown off. I don't know if you can tell. That was weird. Oh man. Okay. Let's see. Dennis, thank you for the support. Andreas, thank you for the support. They say expendable booster, you ask, for planetary defense purposes, of course. Thank you for your continued coverage.
Well, we need to upgrade DART to smacking an asteroid with an entire starship. Is that the deal?
Yeah, let's do it. I'm in. It's like Armageddon 2.
At which point you get that booster back after it's done with the launch, and you put that in the museum.
There you go.
Yeah.
John Miles, thank you for the support. They say, I miss the relatively fast-paced days of SN testing.
It has
it was
been a bit of a lull. At least it feels that way.
I want you to tell us how you feel again in March.
Sure. Fair.
I feel you, though. All joking aside, I feel you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I say this a lot, so forgive me if you're just completely tired of it at this point, but we exist in a very unique point in time, and it will not always be like this. And in fact, it has changed multiple times. So if you're enjoying it at the moment, really take a moment to enjoy it at that moment, because it's not always going to be like that. That was the SN8 to SN15 run there was, wow. It was absolutely wild. What a time.
I mean, and it is so bizarre. Like, it felt simultaneously really, really short, and also like when I look back on that, and I was like, and go like, wow, that from like the first one that did it to SN15 that succeeded was 6 months.
Yep.
Insane.
Yep. Absolutely crazy. And my iPad just died. Thanks, Steve Jobs. Bring up the panel on my computer so I can get your super chats and questions.
You think the production designer on Star Trek who like actually came up with the idea of those pads goes like, "Ooh, Steve Jobs gets the credit"?
I hope not. Because I mean, oh man, don't start talking to me about Apple products unless you want me to start blathering on ad
Yeah,
nauseum. But suffice to say, it's so much more than an idea. I mean, I think anyone that's
Oh,
ever
yeah.
made literally anything knows that ideas are cheap. The actual implementation of a thing, the software, the marriage of the software and the hardware. Oh man, okay. I'll stop. No, I would say
Exactly. If
I
you
hope.
can't tell, we know how to get Jack off onto tangents.
Let's see. Pac-Man321, thank you for the support. They say you guys might have already talked about this already, but what is the impact of losing top employees for the Raptor program? I suspect that the impact there, I mean, not to disparage anybody that has recently left SpaceX, that we've heard about those high-profile departures in the Raptor program. I mean, I suspect they left because there was a bit of a friction between them and perhaps Elon or management at the very least about amount of progress. And hopefully the impact of them leaving is things get reshuffled and work better and any sort of problems with Raptor production get solved rapidly. I mean, I don't think there's going to be a negative impact, but I can't really say.
I mean, yeah, it's I mean, it is hard. Like, will there be a negative impact? Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Like, it is a bit. I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, but like I keep thinking back to like the problems that they're having with the BE4 engines though, as well from Blue Origin, and the constant stories we've seen about the turnover there, and we're seeing turnover at SpaceX as well, and what could be the problem with them? How much trouble could they be in? I mean, really hard to say. I mean, there seemed to be a lot of damage control after that email leaked, right? About the problems that they were facing, but turnover in some regards isn't unexpected. I think it's interesting how companies react to that turnover and how prevalent that turnover continues to be. That ends up telling you a larger story of the engine development process behind the scenes, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think it is sort of worth mentioning that when you get to a certain point in the corporate structure, you don't really get fired because the optics of you being fired would be bad for the company. So instead, you go to pursue other things or go to spend more time with your family, or there's various corporate-y ways to do that sort of thing. And maybe those employees that left sort of left on their own volition in in lieu of being fired or something along those lines, if that makes any sense. There's all sorts of ways that could have played out. But hopefully the ultimate end goal is people who have left are happy in their next jobs, and people who stay figure out ways to meet the goals that are set for them.
Yeah, and to be absolutely fair to that too, like I really hope that's what's happening at Blue Origin too, with the BE4 engines and everything for Vulcan and for New Glenn. Things seem to be moving generally in the correct direction for them as well. So like I hope we get these two mega Methalox engines, because they both seem to be progressing forward in the ways that the companies want, just not as fast as the companies want them to be progressing.
Sure enough. Rough Rider Show in chat says, "What about Tim Cook?" All right, fine, fair. But I really should be saying thanks, Joni or Johnny or however you say his name, because he's the one with the obsession with thinness that resulted in my iPad not having a large battery. Anyways. Nikita Andreev saying, "Do you think there are space companies that can do with such an iterative method like SpaceX, and in general, such a complex project?" The question might have got cut off there, but yeah, I think the iterative approach definitely has its place, and we have seen some other companies take a similar iterative approach. I mean, immediately that comes to mind is Astra.
Yep. And it's safe to say that SpaceX has inspired companies that are taking that approach. Astra comes to mind. Blue Origin has this new test tank that appeared out at Pad 36 that may be undergoing a more iterative approach than some of their other projects. It's definitely been a clear demonstration that iterative design and development can be successful in spaceflight. SpaceX has pretty much proven that. And other
Rocket
companies are.
Factory Augsburg too, I believe.
Oh yeah,
Is another
sure.
is a European example of not just U.S. based rapid iteration, but international as well. Specifically, they're based in Germany.
Absolutely.
Ugh, my iPad still hasn't rebooted, and I have to switch screens like a caveman over here. I might as well be rubbing two sticks together to make fire.
How dare you have to swipe between screens and programs?
You know Mio, I'm probably mispronouncing that. They say, how can I have access to these cameras you guys have? Well, that is Starbase Live. That's how everybody has access to these cameras. Jesse Bear, thank you for the support. They say they're fairly certain the outer engines being exposed is intended. I don't know that I agree with that. They're claiming Elon said something. I don't know that I remember him saying that. I could have missed it, but I don't think so. I have seen some speculation about those outer engines needing to have their own individual QD connections, which I'll believe it when I see it. Entirely possible. I'll believe it when I see it. The Unknown Flying Spaghetti Monster. Love it. Thank you for the support. They say, any chance they're going to use the QD arm today to stabilize the booster? I don't think so. I mean, the QD arm is about the right height, but I think it's more for stabilizing the whole stack than just the individual booster. But that's something to look out for sure. And last up on the Super Chats for now, Pal9000 says, the Starship QD looks low on the tower in relation to the booster. Probably just camera angle, but can the Starship QD translate up and down? That is a very good question. It's my impression that it's fixed, but I could be completely wrong.
Same. I thought it was fixed. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, like I said, that's something to keep an eye on. We'll be able to watch that QD arm move potentially, either in and out or up and down or whatever it's going to end up doing on Starbase Live. So I think with that, it looks like the booster is down. We should let's all go hang out in Starbase Live.
Yeah.
Chris, Thomas, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely.
My pleasure.
Smooth lift and happy to see Booster 4 installed again. And of course, we'll be keeping an eye on the continued operations out at the launch site over on Starbase Live, which is around 24/7. And I think we're all just going to meet you all there. Thank you all for joining us for some commentary, though.
Yes, indeed. And thanks to Michael for running it in the background and Mary and Nick for being out in the field. With that, let's go to Starbase Live.